All right, everyone. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to tonight's program with Lisa Pullman and Melanie Sturm from the Natural Resource Council of Maine, who are here to tell us about NRCM's work to protect Maine's forests and wildlife. I'm Brenda Harrington, Program Librarian at the Belfast Free Library. I want to thank you all for joining us. We are always pleased to continue to co-sponsor these programs with the Belfast Bay Watershed Coalition and glad that we can continue to do so remotely on this Zoom platform. I'd like to remind you all to keep your mics muted and to let you know that there will be a Q&A after the presentation. We ask that you please type your questions into the chat box and I will read them to the presenters at the end of the program. I just want to remind you that the program is being recorded and will be uploaded to the library's website and YouTube page when I get to it. Next, I will turn the mic over to Tom King, board member from the Belfast Bay Watershed Coalition for updates and to introduce tonight's speakers. So take it away, Tom.
Thanks, Brenda. And yes, good evening to all and welcome to the program. Any of the updates for BBWC you're probably going to find on our website, as that's where we are posting most everything. So go ahead and check it out, and you'll be informed as to what we're doing and what's going on. As far as the two speakers go tonight, they're working in tandem here. The first speaker I don't think needs a whole lot of introduction. Lisa Pullman has been with NRCM for quite a while, and I think anybody who knows anything about natural resources in the state recognizes her and her work with NRCM. So she does, though, have a PhD from the Muskie School of Public Service in Southern Maine, and she lives right here in Belfast, and she has been a lifelong advocate for Mother Nature. Now, Melanie Sturm is a newbie, I think, to NRCM, and she comes into the whole forestry end of it. It looks like she has a big job with Maine's forestry and protecting it and protecting our scenic spots in the state. So she's got a big job, and most of it I think will be outlined tonight, if I understand right. She has worked prior to coming to NRCM with the Natural Resource Defense Council out in San Francisco. She's worked as well at the the Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the American Sporting Association in Washington, D.C. She's a graduate of Elizabeth College down in Pennsylvania and a degree in biology, and earned a master's degree from ASU, Arizona State. And she makes her home now in Brunswick. So I think these ladies will be able to give us some good information about our forest and what's going on here in Maine, and where one of our real great natural resource consuls here in Maine is with that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa and to Melanie.
Thank you so much, Tom. That's a lovely introduction, and welcome to everyone. So I now have the dubious honor of trying to share my screen. So give me just a minute while I do that. And I hope it works. There we go. So I'm assuming that there are a lot of people here who know what the Natural Resources Council of Maine is and does, but I'm also going to assume there's people who've never heard of us. So this is a little bit of an introduction of who we are. And for those of you who already know us, you may be wondering, like, what are they up to since COVID hit, right? So after just a few slides and 10 minutes or so, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie, and she's going to continue the sort of deep dive into the forest and wildlife portion of our work. So now let's see if I can forward. There we go. So NRCM has been around for now almost 62 years. We have 25,000 supporters across Maine and beyond. And our mission, as you can see, is to focus on the environment. And we really focus on the policy aspects of the environment. What can we do as a government, regulatory agencies, both the making of laws and the implementing of laws? That's really where our focus is. We work at the local, the state, and the federal level. We don't have staff in DC, but we do try to make sure that Maine's congressional delegation hears from people in the state when key legislation comes up that matters to Maine. So we consider ourselves very nonpartisan, independent, and very effective over the years. And you could see that if you were to go to our website timeline, which shows what all NRCM has done long before I got here. NRCM was up and running and doing great things. So one of the programs that we work on is climate and clean energy. And just briefly, the program director is David Costello now. And the thing that just happened is the Mills administration passed a climate action plan. And it is to get us towards now in statute goals of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions significantly by 2050 and becoming 100% clean renewable energy by 2050. So the plan is a big deal. It was just rolled out on December 1st. All of the work has been done virtually by the Climate Council. And our particular role, we have had a lot of staff working on this, but and going to countless Zoom meetings, God bless David, and everybody else who's been involved. And you know, now it's about implementing this plan and making sure that the right things happen. And one of our focus is that the big sector in Maine is the transportation sector at this point. And how are we going to move people toward electric vehicles and really zero emitting forms of transportation? It's a big state, it's a rural state. And so this is a huge challenge going forward. But that's just some of what we're working on in that area. We're also working on sustainable Maine communities, and kind of in this whole arena is right now, the focus is a lot on plastic pollution. And thus, after getting 15 or so towns to pass a plastic bag ban or an ordinance that made you, you know, they charge 5 cents for the bag or whatever it is, such as Belfast did this. Then we, you know, good old Hannaford's and those kinds of groups were like, no, we'd rather have a statewide ban rather than 15 different ordinances. And so they were behind us when we went to the state and managed to get a statewide ban on single-use plastic bags. However, then COVID hit and everything went backwards. And unfortunately, what is essentially the oil companies convinced everybody that, you know, plastic bags were more sterile and blah, blah, blah. And so anyway, fortunately too, Hannaford's has come back around. They're now allowing us to bring in our bags and that kind of thing. So it's starting to happen again, and hopefully it will be better soon. But it was supposed to go into permanent effect on Earth Day last year, and then it was delayed, and now it's going to be delayed again, and that's just too bad. Likewise, we were the first state in the nation to pass a styrofoam ban, and that was supposed to go into effect, and now it's been delayed. So anyway, this is the kind of thing that's going on. In this particular session, we are working on something called recycling reform, and what that's about is dealing with the packaged materials that things come in. And so you've got the town of Waldo or Belfast or wherever it is you live, and suddenly, you know, you order something on Amazon and it comes and it's like all this plastic and all this stuff is wrapped all around it, and your town is just stuck with dealing with that, right? So this is a program whereby towns can get money that is produced, that is given by or demanded to be given by the producers of non-recyclable wrapping materials. And so it encourages companies to use recycled materials if they don't want to have to pay in. And it's a good boon for towns because now they've got some help with that. So you're going to hear more about this, I believe, next month from one of our other staff members who's working very hard on it now. And so there's a couple other initiatives going on in this arena, but those are just some top line ones. I mentioned federal issues. Obviously, everything changed yesterday. And so we're back in the Paris Climate Accord. We're, you know, the Keystone Pipeline is now dead again, and different things like that are going on. We have to pay attention to the federal legislation, and we have been, and we do, and we'll be trying to support some of the stuff that's happening now. And our support will be, how do we make sure that our congressional delegation hears from Mainers about things that matter to them? Then there's Healthy Maine Waters. Now, this has been a trademark of NRCM's work from the get-go. For those of you who don't know, NRCM was founded in 1959 because of the fight over a new dam that would have flooded the Allagash River waterway. And we won that fight. And as a matter of fact, as many of you know, about 10 years later, the Allagash became the first federally designated wild and scenic river. And as a matter of fact, we celebrated that. Melanie helped put together a nice video program of the 50th anniversary of the Allagash River. And so Healthy Waters has always been a part of what we're doing. We've been very involved in dam removal, in the restoration of fisheries on the Kennebec through the removal of the Edwards Dam in Augusta, the removal of the dam in just up the river on the Kennebec as it turns and goes into the Sebasticook River, because that's where alewives and shad and other sea-run fish, that's where they want to go. And they live in the ocean during the year, but they have to go up the rivers to spawn in the spring. And there was a time when you could practically walk across these rivers. There were so many fish coming up, and that's really been decimated by the dams. So thus the Penobscot River Restoration Program, which was pulled off by a number of organizations working together, raising a lot of money to buy some dams, and the dam owner used the funds to upgrade other dams elsewhere in the river. So we opened up 2,000 miles of fisheries restoration, and then they had no net loss of electric power at the same time. So that's how that worked. But unfortunately, there's not enough money in the world for all the dams that need to come out, I'm sorry to say, because there's 1,000 of them in Maine and there's 90,000 in the country. So we've got a lot of work to do there. And we're actually currently working on the next 4 dams up in the Kennebec. You might have seen an article recently by Woodard down in the Portland Press Herald about the whole issue. We've been plugging away at the process of relicensing these dams and trying to prove to NOAA and other federal agencies that these fish lifts and things just are not good for fish, and they don't manage to get up and over. And so we have some hope that the fish could someday be able to get all the way up the Kennebec into the Sandy River, which is where they want to go and spawn. They really want to go there. And so that is beyond Skowhegan, and that's a bunch of work that we're in the midst of. The other thing that we're doing in this Healthy Waters arena right now is, you may recall that a few years ago, we passed what were the strongest metallic mineral mining laws in the country. And now there's a proposal to have a mine just to the east of the new national monument, the new Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. And it's a proposal by a company called Wolf Den. And we just think it's bogus and we're trying to stop it. So they're in the process of trying to get a rezoning and doing their application and all kinds of stuff. And we just don't think that's right. So, and lastly, of course, I'm now going to turn it over to Melanie because she can talk in great depth about forest and wildlife. I will point out, however, that this picture I took when I was at Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument when it was first created, and that's quite fun. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie.
Thanks, Lisa. That was a great picture. And thank you, Tom and Brenda, for hosting and for all of you taking time tonight to tune in. I am Melanie Sturm, the program director for the Forest and Wildlife Program at NRCM, as Lisa has said. I've been in the role for about a year. And tonight I'm going to tell you a lot really about what we're working on. So next slide, Lisa. This on the slide here is an overview, basically a summary of what the Forest and Wildlife Program is all about. And you can see that we focus a lot on Maine's North Woods. And our work in the Forest and Wildlife Program falls pretty much into three camps. One is responsible land use or development, forest practices, and protecting ecosystems and wildlife. And there are many different projects and programs that fall within each of those, but that's kind of how I'd break up the work. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we've been working on recently and for many years, really. I'll go through a couple of programs. One is something that Lisa mentioned, which is the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. To repeat, it's the issue that got NRCM started in 1959. And to this day, we're still monitoring what management decisions are happening on the waterway. And we're particularly interested in making sure that the wilderness character is maintained. Wilderness character is really hard to define, to really like put your finger on and just to say what exactly it is, but it is incredibly important, not only to the Allagash, but also the Northwoods more broadly. It's really part of Maine's identity. I'm sure you all can understand that. And so that's something that we're interested in maintaining on the Allagash. And yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about that later if you're interested. But as Lisa noted, last year was the 50th anniversary. You can click through this, Lisa, so it doesn't play because it's a couple minutes long. We'll send you the link later, but we did create a video last year for the 50th anniversary of the Allagash being a federally designated wild and scenic river. And it's Maine's only wild and scenic river. It's 92.5 miles and it's pretty significant. So we brought together signature voices of the Allagash and made a little video. So we'll share that with you later on. Something else Lisa mentioned that is just so pivotal to our forest and wildlife work is the Katahdin Woods and Waters, or KWW National Monument. NRCM, this is prior to my time, but NRCM was instrumental in making, in the creation of this monument. And last August, it celebrated 4 years since its designation. And you can go and visit. It's open year round. However, during the winter, like right now, the loop road is closed, but you can still drive into the north end, go cross country skiing if that's your thing. And I'll note that the National Park Service, who manages this National Monument unit, is working on a framework for management, basically a planning document. And NRCM has been engaging on that. Essentially what they're doing with that document is creating broad management zones. And there's 4 different zones. They range from everything from remote recreation, where you really won't run into a lot of people and there's very few facilities, to the other end of the spectrum where there's lots of infrastructure like a welcome center, paved roads, something that you might expect at a national park. So they're working out where to place each of those zones. So go visit. And then something that I've been thinking about a lot lately and will continue to do throughout this year is working on the regional planning process for the Moosehead Lake region. As Lisa mentioned, this region it's special on its own, but it's also special to NRCM. This is a photo taken from Little Moose Public Land, where I went last summer. So what's happening here is you may all be familiar with Plum Creek, which was the company that proposed to develop around Moosehead Lake. They got a concept plan approved back in 2009. And fast forward to last year, 2020, Weyerhaeuser now owns all that land because they bought out Plum Creek. And they decided, because no development that was planned in the concept plan was ever acted on, that they would just get rid of the plan. Like the concept plan at the time in the 2000s was really controversial. NRCM opposed a lot of aspects of the concept plan because we felt like it allowed too much development in the wrong places around the lake. So we were pretty happy to see it go, and we're cautiously optimistic that this new regional planning process will bring good things for the region. So the LUPC, or the Land Use Planning Commission, it's a regulatory body here in Maine. I'm sure you've heard of it. Used to be called LURC, L-U-R-C. They are conducting a multi-year planning process to figure out how to rezone the nearly 17,000 acres around the lake that were slated for development under the concept plan that Plum Creek created, but are now, because the concept plan is gone, are kind of they're going to be rezoned, and the LUPC is consulting stakeholders and the community to determine whether those areas should be for protection of natural resources, for management uses like things like forestry, or if they should be placed under development. So this is a really important planning process. And if you live in, well, you don't live in the area, but if you visit the area, if you cherish it or know anyone who does, I'd encourage you to take a survey that the LUPC has available online. I can send you the link to this as well. And the survey is very short, but you can basically provide your feedback on what you think the future of the region should look like. All right, another area of work for us is the adjacency rule. This is one of the wonkier things that we work on. The adjacency rule sometimes is referred to as the adjacency principle. And for many decades, the Land Use Planning Commission used the adjacency rule as one, to prevent sprawl. That was its purpose. But it was an initial screening for the LUPC to determine if a location was suitable for development. Of course, there were other factors that they took into place, but this was kind of like their first pass at determining if a location was, if it could be developed. And the original and old adjacency rule was called the 1 mile rule for short. And it said that development was allowed within 1 mile as the bird flies of existing compatible development. But in 2019, the LUPC voted to change that. We have a whole new system now, and NRCM was opposed to this change because it opened up, or it made 1 million new acres vulnerable to development. That doesn't mean development is definitely going to occur there, but it's just the possibility is open. And so this new system is what you see here in front of you. I hope it's not too fun. It established 39 rural hubs. You can see those outlined in purple here. And development is allowed, again, this is like an initial screening that the LUPC uses, but it's allowed within 7 miles radius of these rural hubs. And we have yet to see what the effects of this new rule will be, because it hasn't been, it's been almost 2 years, but really not a lot of development has taken place. So we're going to watch it really closely. And this is a big deal for us. And then I had to share, because the program is Forest and Wildlife, what we're doing on the wildlife end. And for us, our wildlife issues tend to be species specific. So if there's a particular issue with a species or population of wildlife, then we'll weigh in. And some examples are up here on the screen. So for instance, you folks may be familiar that Winter ticks are a huge issue for moose in Maine, and with milder winters because of climate change, moose are being badly affected, unfortunately dying, and that's going to have over time take a toll on the moose population. And so we're watching that closely. Another example is Canada lynx. It's federally endangered, and NRCM submitted comments when the US government was deciding whether to list the lynx as endangered or not. So that happened a few years ago. Common loon, that has come up for us because sometimes there's issue with lead tackle, the loon ingesting lead tackle. And so we'll get involved if there's ever a period for public comment. And then finally, on the bottom left of the screen, that's an eastern brook trout. For the anglers in the audience, you know that Maine is the last viable habitat for this type of trout. And ways that it intersects with the Forest and Wildlife Program is mainly through forest practices. So if there's cutting or mismanagement in the shoreland zone, basically right along a riparian area or a river, that could affect fish habitat. And so we kind of watch out for that. All right, and now I wanted to share a little bit about legislation because the new legislative session of the Maine legislature just got going. In December, the new legislators and the returning ones were sworn in, and they're just beginning to do committee work, but it looks a lot different this year, as you can imagine. Everything is virtual. No one is meeting in the State House in Augusta, and they're pretty much paperless. And for Maine, a legislature that is pretty old school, if I can say, it's a big change because we used to meet in the hallways face to face. Co-sponsors of bills used to actually have to physically sign papers to co-sponsor a bill. So now that's all a little bit different this year, but I think they're doing a pretty good job of getting up to speed because they have to. There are over 1,600 bills that were introduced this session, and they've gotten to work. So I'm going to tell you about 3 of them that we're supporting. And the first one, Lisa, do you mind moving forward? Thank you. Actually, you can click one more time. The first one is Land for Maine's Future. I hope you're familiar with this program because it's been super successful for Maine. It was started in 1987, and this program funds land conservation throughout the state. And so far, in its 30 years, it has protected land in all 16 counties, I think covering over 600,000 acres. So it's really significant, and it's been an important funding source for conservation. And it's not only about land conservation, it also funds working forests, working waterfronts, and working farmlands. And unfortunately, the program has run out of money because it has relied on bond funding in the past. And so the LMF bond bill that we're working on this session would refund the program and help us do some of the important conservation work that remains to be done. But I'll just note that over the past few decades, Maine has done a fabulous job with conserving more of its land. And a lot of that has to do with land trusts, but some of it is just more public land. And hopefully you can see the color differences between these 2 maps in this 20-year span. So if we click again, too, we can see the conserved land by the numbers. And again, Maine has, even since this chart was created, the grand total here is a little over 4 million acres, but we've gone beyond that. Just like this week or last week, a new wildlife refuge was created in southern Maine. So we're definitely incrementally increasing this, and the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument was a big bump as well. But Maine, compared to other New England states, you might be surprised, is actually lagging behind in the percentage of public land we have. So we're working hard to get funding to increase that. The second bill that we are supporting that is related to my work is a bill to expand and enhance the ecological reserve system. If you're not familiar, ecological reserves are a type of public land here in Maine. You can see them, all the 17 reserves in dark green on this map. And ecological reserves are unique in that they are some of the wildest pockets left in Maine. Cutler Coast, for example, a lot of folks know, just astounding. They don't, on reserve lands, no timber harvesting or commercial activity is allowed, pretty much just low impact recreation. And their whole purpose is to protect natural communities that represent all the natural communities that occur in Maine. So although these are special places, the problem is there's a statutory cap on how many acres can be part of this system. The cap is 100,000 acres, and right now the size of the system is just over 90,000 acres. So we're fast approaching the cap, yet a lot of areas have not been protected that need to be. So we would like to just raise the cap so the opportunity to bring more ecological reserves into the system is available. And thirdly, and lastly, is a bill to change the way that LUPC, like I said, Land Use Planning Commission, commissioners are appointed. This is a table of the current commissioners. There are 9 of them, and you can see based on the second column that 8 of that 9 are selected by counties, and 1 is appointed by the governor. And this was not always the case. This was a LePage era change. Prior to 2011, the LUPC consisted of 7 commissioners, all appointed by the governor. And because the governor had discretion, they selected folks with a range of expertise. So when evaluating these complicated projects and proposals that the LUPC has to look at, they had folks with a variety of backgrounds to really fully assess, like, what are the implications of this project. But since then, unfortunately, we've lost some of that diversity and expertise. And we do have a local perspective better represented because the counties serve on the commission, but we're lacking a statewide perspective. And really, the LUPC manages and oversees the unorganized territories, which is 10.5 million acres, about half the state of Maine. It's really a national treasure, and it needs a statewide perspective, like folks with a statewide perspective to really do it justice. So this change, in essence, the change that we're seeking with this bill is to allow the governor to appoint more commissioners. The counties would appoint fewer. And then just a couple more slides. Thanks for bearing with, but I did want to note that the world is changing and Maine is changing too. And so there are 2 things going on right now that really kind of influences everything that we work on, including forests and wildlife. And one is what Lisa mentioned, which is climate change. It is the crisis of our time alongside biodiversity loss. And Maine has fortunately stepped up with the governor's climate action plan, which he signed and released in December. And there's some good stuff in here, aside from a lot of initiatives on renewable energy and the climate and clean energy side of things. There's also some things about protecting natural and working lands. And in fact, there's a commitment to protect 30% of Maine's land by 2030. Which seems like a big deal, but right now we've actually protected 21%. So it's not a huge leap to think that we could get to 30% by the end of the decade. And in order to do that, we do need funding, that's for sure. And the Land for Maine's Future program that I mentioned could provide some of that funding that we need. And the reason I mention natural and working lands here is that they sequester and store carbon, which is a big help in the fight against climate change. And then the second phenomena of last year that many of you probably noticed firsthand is that Maine's real estate market was really, it shot up last year. And it has steadily increased since the 1980s. You know, folks have moved here for decades, but last year it was just really notable. And again, I'm sure you saw that yourselves just by seeing the number of for sale signs. But this is important because it's not only southern and coastal Maine that are getting a lot of attention, but also rural and northern Maine. And I bring this up only because we work in the Northwoods and we really don't want to see sprawl. We don't want to see habitat fragmentation. We want to see well-planned communities where, you know, economic development can happen, but without sacrificing natural resources and scenic character. So if this trend continues, it's just something that we will want to watch out for and plan ahead for. And that's all I had to share with you. Happy to take questions. But again, thanks so much for having us. And I appreciate you listening.
Great, thank you, Melanie and Lisa. Interestingly enough, there are no questions in the chat, so.
All right, so people are going to have to raise their hand.
And I know somebody sent me a question on my email. If you could unmute yourself and ask your question. Sid, that was you. Could you do that, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I've enjoyed the presentation very much. Well, it gets me out of the coast and into the hills at the very least, and it's just beautiful. And of course, I've been up there too, and I applaud the NRCM for its work there. My concern and my question is much more local in the Belfast area, because the NRCM is really quite famous, and justifiably so, for, as it says, protecting the woods, the waters, and the wildlife in Maine. The coastal areas, particularly the blue areas of intertidal zones, have become more and more important, both in terms of ecology, environment, and in terms of climate control. They are a wonderful carbon sink. Yet they're threatened, particularly at the mouth of the Little River, by the Nordic Aqua Farms project. And I really would like to know why the NRCM has not, at the very least, come out to publicly oppose the construction of the massive facility that's there. I'll also add one other thing regarding the dam. There are two dams there. And that is that although, of course, there's local interest in maintaining the lower dam because of the reservoir and the usefulness that it has in terms of recreation and wildlife that are there, and it is abundant. I think that the long-term goal of restoring the Little River, like the Kennebec and the Penobscot, and maybe the Goose River as well, in removing dams and restoring the river for salmon, it can be considered part of the long-term goal. Personally, my only concern about removing the lower dam is that it might provide an access for Nordic Aqua Farms to run its pipes down the Little River and out into Belfast Bay. So those are my concerns for the NRCM, and I'd appreciate their addressing those concerns. Thank you.
So I'll take a stab at them. I'm going to start with the last one first. So you mentioned the Little River Dam, and I'm going to say that, you know, there's a lot of work to be done. There's 1,000 dams in Maine. We're focusing mostly on the three main rivers in Maine, the big ones, the Androscoggin on the west, the Kennebec in the middle, and the Penobscot River in the toward the east. And Maine Rivers is an organization that is taking on sort of dam deconstruction in various and sundry other places. They're a very small organization. I know our Healthy Waters director and staff scientist, Nick Bennett, sits on the board of the Maine Rivers, but you know, I know that they've been working on taking out the dam at China Lake and things like that. So you know, they might get to this one if you needed the help, but I think you know, if you want it in a hurry, probably that's going to have to be local work. On the issue of the aqua farm, I just want to say, obviously, here members, and they have members on this issue. Is what it is, you know, we understand, we totally is on the issue and the effluent issue and all that. I mean, we get what you're talking about. There are also people who understand or who believe that, you know, the demand for salmon is going to stay high in the United States and in the world, and that this kind of aqua farm is potentially better than putting them in pens out in the off the shore, which is how they're doing salmon now. So that's kind of the back and forth there, and we have decided to stay out of it. And there's plenty of other work to do, as we mentioned, with the big dams on the Kennebec and the mine. And so I apologize. I'm sorry that there, you know, there's things that we can't work on and we don't work on, and we have to make these kinds of decisions all the time. And that's just where we stand. There's a question about,
Oh, okay, you're reading them, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So there was one, you go ahead though.
Oh, wait, I lost it. Oh, somebody wants to know where to go in Maine to see old growth forests and how old are some of those trees there?
Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, some ideas. Baxter State Park has some old growth forests, and it might take some traveling to get there. They're not the forests that are on the park boundaries, but definitely check that out. Some of the ecological reserves, they on average have older trees than the rest of Maine. So yep, check out the ecological reserve system. And I think even in like the Mahoosix range, you might encounter some. And in terms of age, unfortunately, I'm not totally sure. I don't want to lead you astray, but I can look it up and let you know.
I'm just curious myself, are those forests, how would you know that you were in the old growth forest? Are they marked somehow or mentioned in a book or anything?
I bet they're not marked. I mean, you could do some Google searching, but in terms of like visuals, what you want to look for in an old growth forest is complexity. And growth forest has down trees, like really mossy, overgrown, fallen trees. It's called coarse woody debris, and it's really good for just creating little habitat niches for all sorts of wildlife. And obviously, you want tall, large trees with girth, because that just means they're older. Yeah, you're looking for a messy forest. That's an old growth forest.
Just curious, is there any virgin forest in the state of Maine?
I don't know that there is. I was thinking there's little pockets and I hear about them, but again, I'm like Melanie, I don't want to lead you astray, but I'm kind of remembering that there was one up by Dexter or something, you know, but I'm not sure that there's any virgin forest left in Maine. I don't know that one way or another. We can find out.
And going along with that is the corridor for CMP cutting through some real pristine area. Is there any hope that this will be stopped?
Well, I'll take that one, and then Melanie, you can chime in. So it's a sort of a day by day fight. And you have to remember that Central Maine Power and Hydro-Quebec are spending millions of dollars to try to convince the people of Maine to support the corridor. And they just today there was the announcement that the citizens of Maine, mostly folks in Western Maine, but not just, had reached enough signatures to verify a ballot question that's going to go on the ballot next fall that is meant to allow the legislature to weigh in with a vote having to do with what they call high voltage lines. So this is things that are tall, like the Central Maine corridor. And it is supposed to be retroactive. So one of the tricky things is, how do you keep Central Maine Power from starting to build the line, actually cutting trees? They're not yet, but how do you, I mean, they're supposed to start any day. And we just got a couple days ago an injunction against them, telling them not to start cutting until one of our appeals of one of the permits is resolved in court. So they've been pushed off for another just like couple weeks. But if what happens is they have started to build the corridor and suddenly it's next November and the people of Maine support this petition and it's supposed to be retroactive, they're just in a place of being able to say, wow, look at all that we've done already. And, you can't make us stop now. And oh, it's going to cost so much money and blah, blah, blah. So we really don't want them to start cutting. And yet I'm not sure. I mean, we're just trying everything under the sun, every legal thing we can think of to get them to stop. And meanwhile, they're just pouring millions of dollars into the state. You see the ads on TV. For a while, when we tried the last petition, well, we didn't try it, but the citizens called Stop the Corridor, they collected enough signatures, and then the Maine Supreme Court threw out their ballot initiative, even though they had enough signatures. So if that had gone on the ballot in the fall, I think we would have won. And that would have stopped it. But now, I don't know, we're just trying everything we can. So the question you asked, though, is that pristine forest? Of course, they're saying, oh no, this is industrial forest and it's been cut before and this is all good for the climate and blah, blah, blah. And our central issue is we don't think it's good for the climate. We think that it's really Hydro-Quebec, this huge dam company, a hydro project up in Quebec, dribbling over into Labrador and everywhere else, that they're going to take power from other places and send it to Massachusetts, because Massachusetts passed a law that said that they're willing to pay for more clean renewable energy. But what is going to happen with the places they've taken it from, like New York and Ontario? What are they going to do? And so is it really just like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic when it's really all going down, is really kind of how we feel. And they've never allowed an independent study of the climate benefits of this project. We tried to get that going last year in the legislative session before COVID hit and everybody ran home. So it's a problem. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we're going to win. I don't know that we're going to lose. I don't know what's going to happen, but people really don't want this thing. Any other questions?
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa, thank you, Melanie. That was a great presentation. I enjoyed it.
Good.
It's always nice to hear what NRMCM is doing, and and where we're going, and knowing that you're working for the people of Maine and the resources of Maine, and that's great. So it was a pleasure.
Well, just know we're still at it. Even if we're all working at home, we're still at it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good.
Thanks very much. And thank you for BBWC's work. It's great to chat with you all tonight.
Before we zoom out, I just want to say Melanie put the links in the chat for the video for the 50th anniversary and for the questionnaire. or whatever it
Yes.
is, the comment thing for LUPC at the Moosehead region. If you want to, I'll keep it up for a few minutes. I won't log out, so you can grab the link if you want them. I'll grab them.
Thanks.
I'll put them on our webpage too, but I guess I can do it that way too. But anyway, thank you all.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah, I'm glad my bandwidth survived. Almost didn't.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.